to winning isn't easy. Let's talk about post-stroke cognitive impairment and an ERISA disability claim. A stroke occurs when the blood supply is stopped or reduced to parts of the brain and cells are deprived of oxygen and nutrients. And as a result, this can cause physical or cognitive problems, such as paralysis in part of the body, numbness and pain in areas of the body, speech and language issues, cognitive issues, having problems with short-term thinking, short or long-term memory. And we know that any one of these problems can be disabling. Disability carriers, however, seem to have difficulty with cognitive impairment claims because they say anybody can have problems with their memory. I can't remember where I left my keys and I'm working. What's your problem? Obviously, you need to understand how disability carriers will view post-stroke cognitive impairment claims. Now, the nature of your cognitive impairment will generally depend on the nature of the stroke that you had. An ischemic stroke, for example, occurs when the blood clot blocks an artery leading to part of the brain. A hemorrhagic stroke occurs when there's bleeding in the brain. 87% of strokes are ischemic, and the remaining 13% are hemorrhagic. And the nature of the cognitive impairment is going to depend on the location of the stroke in your brain. Post-stroke cognitive impairment, called PSCI, happens at least 50% of the time. And studies show that 1/3 of those who have a stroke will go on to develop dementia. Got all of that? So what are the things that the carrier is looking for in your medical records? Again, they're looking for objective evidence of the stroke. So they want to see a brain MRI or a CT scan, a speech pathology testing, reports regarding the existence of speech or language problems, and the extent and nature of those problems, documentation of paralysis, objective testing, coordinating numbness, and the impact that the numbness has on your functionality, cognitive testing, documenting the cognitive impairment, and correlation with the results of MRIs. They want to see continued cognitive testing, documenting the progression of your cognitive impairment, and they want functional capacity testing, documenting the limitations in your physical functioning. That's all of the kinds of information that can establish that you can perform the material and substantial duties of your own occupation or any occupation as those terms are defined in your policy. Remember, you've got the burden of proof. Now, one of the things that I think is important is vocational issues secondary to a stroke. And what do I mean by that? Your medical records should document the physical and cognitive restrictions that you have. But that's not necessarily always enough to meet the standard of disability. There's got to be a connection between whatever the physical limitations are and the cognitive limitations and restrictions to your inability to do your own or any occupation. So let's say, for example, you're having problems remembering new information or sequencing information. The disability carrier plan is going to want to see objective evidence on an MRI of the injury to that portion of the brain that regulates that function, and that it was damaged by a stroke. And then they're going to want to see the results of neurocognitive testing that will correlate between your claimed impairments and the damage done as a result of the stroke. So that's sort of the medical aspect of that. But from a vocational standpoint, they are going to get an opinion as to whether or not all of this correlates and explains the work duties that would be impacted so you couldn't do the material and substantial duties of your occupation. I routinely use neurocognitive testing in these cases and combine it with a sign-off by the doctor, and then we tie it together with a vocational opinion. You've got the burden to build the proof and connect the dots as to why you physically and cognitively can't do the material and substantial duties of your occupation. You can see it takes a lot of work, a lot of teamwork, and you may not be physically, cognitively able to do that, or you might find the task exhausting. So don't kind of bumble along and think that the disability carrier is going to do it for you or is going to see why it is you're disabled and merely pay benefits. Got it? Let's take a break.